The permits for Mystery Canyon are extremely difficult to get, so when On snagged some, we knew we needed to head out there and check out what all the fuss was about. You will need 2 cars to do this canyon. You'll be leaving one of the cars at the visitor center, and then you'll be loading everyone and their gear into the car and heading up and out of the park to the East Mesa trailhead. The drive will take about an hour, and unfortunately someone's going to have to do it again at the end of the day. You might want to pack some caffeine in the car that you leave at the visitor center, because this drive wasn't very fun the second time we had to do it when we were both really tired. After driving for a while, you're going to be making a left into the Ponderosa Ranch Resort. We highly recommend downloading either the GPX or the KML file off of Rogue Wiki. That is going to make finding the trailhead way easier. You also might want to get an early start. We got hung up at the visitor center trying to find a parking spot, and by the time we got to the trailhead, it was already getting pretty full. Things are going to be starting off nice and easy as you hike about 2.1 miles to the beginning of the technical section. You will be gaining about 270 feet of elevation, but this happens very gradually and the trail almost feels flat most of the time. This seemed to lure us into a bit of a false sense of security because canyoneering approaches can usually be pretty tricky, but worry not because the tricky part was just about to come. You see, this canyon has something known as the Death Gully. And even though there are no reported cases of fatal accidents here, we can definitely see where it gets its name from. At first, when we all looked over the edge, we thought there is no way that this is the right way to go. But after checking our GPS, we realized that it was in fact the correct route. So it was time to put our helmets on and get started. This is definitely one of those spots where the video can't do justice to just how sketchy this was. The hillside felt like it was almost completely vertical, and all of the loose rocks slid out from under you with every single step. In just under a mile, you will be dropping about 1,300 feet. We did find a map for Mystery Canyon about halfway down the hill, but it had seen better days. As we got closer to the bottom of the hill, I think that everyone pretty much gave up on trying to stay up on their feet. And we were definitely wishing we had installed a scuttlebutt on our harness for this trip. At a couple of points, it seemed like the downhill would never end. But finally, the steepness seemed to taper off slightly. There were still a few parts with some butt sliding involved, but thankfully the steepest parts of the hill were over. As popular of a canyon as this is, there were some very overgrown spots down towards the bottom of the hill. Eventually the canyon will be hooking off to the left, but just before it does, you'll find yourselves at a bolted anchor. This is not what the guides are considering as Rappel 1. That is a little further down the canyon, and a lot of people actually can down climb this. If your goal is to get through the canyon quick, this one does have a bypass and you can skip it. There are actually a couple of short slides and very small rappels that aren't on the official list. You'll be encountering these optional rappels for about the first mile of the canyon. Most of these are only about 20 feet high, so you can use your own judgment to see if you need to rappel it or not. We did end up jumping on rope for this short one. It seemed like it was just a little bit on the wide side to be down climbed, and we figured we would rather be safe than sorry. That led us to a nice little stroll through the canyon until we reached what would end up being the last of the optional rappels. This is another short and simple one, but it is just high and tricky enough that down climbing it didn't seem like a great idea. Once you are done with this part, you will be finished with the less notable section of this canyon. I guess it's because it's fairly simple and there aren't any real rappels up to this point. But most of the guides seem to have a gap between the Death Gully and the first rappel, so hopefully this helps you see a little bit of what it's like. Speaking of the first rappel, here it is. This one is quite simple and it'll have you dropping about 50 feet down a chute. I wouldn't consider it a big rappel by any means, but it is a good one to start off the day. The action will be ramping up at this point, and just 40 feet down the canyon you will be at rappel 2. This one is about 10 feet shorter than the first rappel, but it's very photogenic. The vast majority of the rappels in this canyon are going to be on the shorter side, and 8 out of 10 are under 50 feet. You're not going to be getting over 100 feet until the last two, which are 120 and 110 feet. Just like the gap between rappel 1 and 2, rappel number 3 is once again about 40 feet down the canyon. And also with keeping on trend, it's about 30 feet tall, so it's about 10 feet shorter than rappel 2. But this is where we will be breaking the tradition, because after this small down climb, it's only about 20 feet to rappel 4. This is a tiny 12-foot rappel that I'm sure more experienced canyoneers would be able to down climb. We really like how packed together everything in this part of the canyon is. It seems like every time you get off the rope, you turn around and you're right at another rappel. After the 12-foot rappel, you're only about 20 feet from another 50-foot rappel. On this one, you'll be landing on a ledge, but don't get off the rope just yet because you have to continue a little bit further down to a slab. This is the second part of rappel 5 right here, so you can see what was tucked around the corner. If you're doing this canyon during the warmer months, I hate to break it to you, but you're going to be heading out into the elements for a little bit. Luckily it wasn't too warm when we went, but if it is when you're there, you can take a little bit of peace of mind in knowing that you're probably going to be wet in just a little bit. But you're going to have to put some work in before you get to enjoy the water. And that includes working your way about 100 feet down this V slot. Once you reach the end of the V slot, you will find yourself at rappel 6, which is a nice little 40-footer. This is probably one of the most simple and straightforward rappels of this entire canyon. As we finished up on rappel 6, On and Aaron headed on ahead up to rappel 7. We were doing our best to make good time because one thing about this canyon is that you do not want to miss the shuttle at the end of the narrows. That will make for a very long walk all the way back to the visitor center. The pace of the canyon is going to slow down quite a bit after rappel 7. Even On felt the slowing of the pace and decided to take a nap. You're going to be right back out in the sun for quite a while, so it would be a good idea to apply some sunscreen here. This is by far the longest stretch that you'll be hiking between rappels. You will be making your way past blind arches, and you're also going to have to climb up and over a landslide that happened somewhere between 1976 and 1977. Climbing over the landslide did require a decent amount of energy, but the view from the top was well worth it. Finally, after a long walk, we were back to the action at rappel 8. This is another simple 50-footer, and it's also the last one under 100 feet that you'll be doing on your run through Mystery Canyon. From rappel 8, you will be following the water course down the canyon. I know that conditions can change rapidly, but on this run through the canyon, we encountered a very slippery log right here. It must have been here for quite some time, and it's been polished by water and sand rushing through the canyon. We all ended up making it through just fine, but it sure seemed sketchy in the moment. And we also had to stem our way over this small pothole that was full of water that none of us wanted anything to do with. Luckily, we all made it through unscathed. After that, we arrived at rappel 9, which is the big daddy of this canyon. This rappel comes in at a very respectable 120 feet, and you have to work your way out along this safety line just to set it up. Please take your time and be very careful here. This rappel is notorious for sticking ropes, and that unfortunately led to a fatal accident with a solo canyoneer last year. There is a large boulder wedged into the crack right above the pool at the bottom. If you're getting tired on the way down, you can land on top of it and take a break. Just note that as you work your way down the boulder into the pool, it is going to get very slippery, so watch your step. According to some of the guides, you used to be able to jump off the boulder into the pool, but unfortunately in 2005 a bunch of sand was washed into the pool and now it's way too shallow to jump. The water here was pretty brisk on our visit, but after being out in the sun, it was quite refreshing. It was really unfortunate to hear about the infamous past of this rappel. It's really beautiful here, and this rappel was a lot of fun. But this just serves as a reminder that we really need to be careful and always double check everything. We did end up doing one more unofficial rappel on our way towards the end of the canyon. This is most likely another one that could be downclimbed, but everything was really wet and slippery. I was the first one down on this rappel, and I got to let everyone else know about a little bit of a surprise that this tiny rappel had to offer. For some reason, the little cave under the boulder that you can see right here was absolutely packed full of spiders. And as brave as everyone in our group is, you could tell that that didn't quite sit well with a lot of people. I'm not exactly sure what kind of spiders they were, but luckily they didn't seem to bother anybody. After we said goodbye to our new arachnid friends, we were just a short and leisurely walk from the grand finale of this canyon. And here we are at the top of rappel number 10, which is a 110-foot rappel down into the Narrows. By this time it was early evening and we didn't have quite the crowds that you can get at the bottom. But there were still definitely some people at the bottom that were pretty stoked to watch us make our way down. And with the crowds in mind, please note that this rappel is very slippery. V was one of the only members of our group to make it down on her feet, while everyone else seemed to elect to slide down. I wasn't really looking to make a fool out of myself in front of all of our spectators. The last member of our group to make his way down was On, and he said to be sure to record it, so I knew he had something up his sleeve. I don't think the camera quite does it justice because he came down with a ton of speed. And with that, we had officially conquered Mystery Canyon. All we had to do now was walk out and hopefully make it before the last shuttle of the day left. It's only about a half-mile walk from the bottom of rappel 10 to the paved part at the end of the Narrows. If you haven't hiked the Narrows before, you need to watch your step because there are a lot of rocks that you can twist your ankle on, and it would be a bummer to get hurt now after you just survived Mystery Canyon. We were definitely relieved once we got to the pavement because it appeared that we were going to make it back to the shuttle with plenty of time to spare. We still had a mile left on the paved trail, but that was going to be a piece of cake compared to everything that we had been through up to this point. As we rounded one last corner, we got a tiny glimpse of one of the shuttle buses and a sigh of relief fell over the crowd. This was one heck of a fun experience and we'd love to send a huge thank you out to On for including us. Have you ever hiked the Narrows? How far did you go in? Let us know in the comments below. If you want to see another epic Zion Canyoneering video, click in the upper corner right now to watch our run through the subway. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of our upcoming ones. And for all the information about Mystery Canyon, head on over to 𝐊𝐇𝐈𝐒.com.